Genesis 26 is where we are today as we continue in the story. And I'm going to come in a little hot because I'm exhausted and I'm out of my mind. But one of the things that I want to impress upon you, here's something God put in my spirit. And so usually I ease into the message, and I want to come in a little hot today because something that God said I understand when we're talking through Genesis, we're talking about water wells and infertility and 4 Eastern kings going to war with 5 Western kings, and we're talking about land and tombs at Machpelah and Mamre, and we're talking about animals and breeding and water coming up from the ground, and we're talking about minutia. And the reality is, when I look out over your faces and I see glazed look on your faces, like this isn't the most fascinating stuff you've ever heard, that troubles me. And here's why. Because God is a God of the mundane. God is a God of the everyday life stuff. God is not just a God of miracles and phenomenon and supernatural, extraordinary things. God is in the minutia. He's in the details. He's in the grass growing. He's in dead bodies and siblings stealing each other's birthright and giving people soup and bread. And God's story is about these details. And my fear is that if we just think that God is going to show up in the supernatural and the phenomenal and the metaphysical and the miracles and in the special things, we're going to miss God. And God said to me, Daryl, you got to tell them to perk up on these small details because I am in the small things, not just in the big things. And so you're going to miss God, because if you miss him in the mundane in the Bible, you're going to miss him in the mundane in your life. And God said to me, Daryl, I don't want our people to miss me while they're pumping gas at the gas station. And now they've got entertainment at the pump. And so it's easy to check out. I don't want them to miss me when they're walking their dog. That's where I'm at. I'm in the small things, not just in the miracles and in the metaphysical and the supernatural. I'm in the folding laundry. That's where you can find me. And we got some laundry at home need to be folded too. But that's where God is. And so if we miss him in the insignificant, small things in the Bible, we're going to miss him in the insignificant, mundane, and small things in our lives. Because we learn to find God in the scriptures. That's how we know where to look for him in our lives. So if you miss him here, you're going to miss him there. And God is saying, I don't want them to miss me. So I know that we're talking about stuff that's not sexy, that's not sensational, and that is not tabloid worthy, but it's God's story. And he breathed out every one of these words. And this week, this is deja vu all over again. For those of you that have been trekking with us, this is going to sound a lot like Genesis 12 and Genesis 20. It is deja vu. It is, you're going to read this and you're going to say, hey, I feel like I've been here before. I feel like I saw this movie already, because you have. What we're going to learn today is this aphorism that is like father, like son, like mother, like daughter. And Isaac's story is unfortunate, because Isaac's story is not about him. He's overshadowed by his amazing dad and his scrappy sons. And so he gets little airtime in his own story. And this is one of those weeks where he's the primary character in his story. And so this is going to sound eerily familiar to you. It is deja vu, and I want to tell you that all over again. 2 big movements in the text. The first one, in verses 1 through 22, is that God's blessings will cause some folks to connive against us, to conspire against us. Our blessings that are great for us cause people to envy and hate on us. And we need to be ready for the flip side of the blessing. Because the backside of the blessing is great for us. It's fullness, it's satisfaction, it's euphoria for us, but it's envy for others. And so what we want to see in this move in verses 1 through 22 is that God blesses Isaac, and it causes other folks to connive against him. Let's look at God's instructions to Isaac in verses 1 through 6, because we have a problem in verses 1 through 22 that God wants to work out in Isaac's life. But God's directive to remain in Canaan is connected to the destiny. Why is God decreeing and instructing him? Because we have a problem. In verse 1, there's a huge problem. Verse 1 says, there was another famine in the land in addition to the one that occurred in Abraham's time. And Yitzhak went to Abimelech, king of the Philistines, at Gerar. So that's a problem. Just like there was a famine in Genesis 12 when Abraham left the promised land and went down into Egypt, and we know about the episode in Egypt, the debacle that took place down there. And so there's another famine in the land, and we think that, I don't know, Isaac is probably 75, 80 years old at this point, and there's a famine in the land. Usually famines happen as a result of three things. Usually drought, could be wars between people, and so trade routes have been cut off and land have been stolen, and so war was a big contributor to droughts, to famines in the ancient Near East, especially within Canaan, but also disease was a contributing factor to famines in the land. And it's probably likely here that a drought, a prolonged chronic drought had made food very scarce in the promised land. And so Isaac goes to Abimelech. Remember, Gerar is on the way to Egypt. You pass through Gerar, going from Canaan, going southwest to Egypt. But watch this, before he can make his trek down southwest to Egypt to escape the famine, look at God meets him in verse 2, and Yahweh appeared to him and said, don't go down to Egypt. Your dad made that mistake. Live in the land. Look, God gives him three commands. The first one is, don't go down to Egypt. The second command is, live in the land that I tell you about. Number 3, stay in this land as a ger, as an alien, as an outsider, a stranger, a foreigner. And 5 outcomes of, if you obey God, here are the 5 outcomes. God says, if you do these 3 things, if you obey my 3 commands, here are the 5 ways in which I'm going to bless you. God says, first of all, I will be with you. That's the first time in the Bible God has told anybody that he would be with them. That's a huge no. God says, you don't have to go it alone. I'm going to be with you. Number 1. Number 2, God says, I will bless you. Well, he's been telling his father that for years, and now he says it directly to Yitzhak. He says, I'm going to bless you. Number 3, he says, for I will give all these lands to you and your offspring. Number 4, I will confirm my oath that I swore to your father Abraham. What did he swear to Abraham in Genesis 22? He said, I will make your offspring as numerous as the stars of the sky. And I will give your offspring all these lands. Number 5, and all the nations of the earth will be blessed by your offspring. So here, God gives him 3 commands, and then he gives him 3 outcomes or benefits to obeying that command. I love how verse 5 and 6 says, God says this to Isaac about his dad. He says, because Abraham listened to me and kept my mandates and my commands and my statutes and my instructions, so Isaac settled in Gerar. He says, look, the reason why I'm going to fulfill my covenant to you is not because of your character and your merit. It's because your father was my servant, and he did exactly what I told him to do. Abraham was great at following God's instructions. It was when there weren't any instructions when he got in trouble. But when God said circumcise all of the folks in your house, he did it. When God said go here and do this, he did it. And so here Abraham is being set up as this model individual who follows the commands of God, and all of the Israelites and all of the people of God, those of us that are his sons and daughters by faith, he's the paradigm of what it means to be the people of God. Because when God tells him to do something, he does it immediately, and he does it just the way God told him to do it. And so here, Isaac gets this blessing that God is going to prosper him, and God is going to bless him exponentially because of his dad. You ever got a blessing because of somebody else, because of a parent, grandparent, an aunt, an uncle, or cousin, or somebody, you receive favor, fortune, or an opportunity because of somebody else? You ever got a job because somebody else put a word in for you? Somebody gave you a second chance because somebody vouched for you and said you were good for it? We know how amazing that feels, and know, man, I'm here on somebody else's blessedness and not my own. And that gives us a greater sense of responsibility to want to do well because somebody else stuck their neck out for us. And here Isaac is the beneficiary of his father's righteousness and merit with Almighty God. Now, here's the deja vu part in verses 7 through 11, because Isaac's deception is deja vu for the patriarchal family. You remember when Abraham went to Egypt and went to Gerar with the Philistines, and they asked about his wife Sarah, and he lied and said, oh, this is not my wife, this is my sister. Well, fruit don't fall far from the tree. Look at this episode in verses 7 through 11. And when the men of the place of the Philistines in Gerar asked about Isaac's wife, Rebekah, he said, she's my sister. For he was afraid to say, my wife, thinking the men of the place will kill me on account of Rebekah, because she is beautiful. That sound familiar? You guys watched that in Genesis 11, Genesis 12, and 20. And when verse 8 says, and when Isaac had been there for some time, Abimelech, king of the Philistines, looked down from his window and was surprised to see Isaac caressing and fondling his wife Rebekah. The king said, what is going on here? Is this incest? Verse 9, Abimelech sent for Isaac and said, so she really is your wife? Then how could you say she is my sister? And Isaac answered him, because I thought that I might die on account of her. And then Abimelech in verse 10 said, what have you done to us? One of the people could have easily have slept with your wife, and you would have brought guilt on all of us. So Abimelech warned all the people, whoever harms this man or his wife will certainly be put to death. So the same way the virtues can be in the father, so can the vices be in the son. So some of Abraham's virtues are in Isaac. Because when God says, don't go down to Egypt, what does Isaac do? He stays in Gerar. He stays in the promised land. The virtue of the father is in the son. But this paragraph tells us that the vices of the father are also in the son. That the son is prone to fear, and then when he becomes fearful, falsehood is not far behind. You guys remember Abraham had a problem with fear leading to his falsehood, and now the son has the same issue. How is that possible? If the dad didn't tell the son about his faults and about his failures. And then the son replicates and repeats those same ungodly and unhealthy behaviors. It's interesting because when the king looks down on Isaac, having a little foreplay with Rebekah, the text says that Isaac is Isaacing Rebekah. Because one of the connotations for Isaac is not just laughter, but it also has a sexual connotation. And so there's a word play in the Hebrew that you can't see in the English. But Isaac is Isaacing Rebekah. Now, here's what's interesting. God had just told Isaac that if he obeyed the voice of the Lord, all of the nations would be blessed by him. Remember, we as the people of God are not just consumers of the blessings, but we're supposed to be what? Conduits of the blessing. And here is Isaac's first opportunity to be a blessing to the nations. And what does he do? He puts the Philistines and Gerar in jeopardy. Because if somebody had taken his wife and taken her as their wife, it would have brought judgment and condemnation and guilt from God on the whole nation. Here, Isaac is not a blessing to the nations. He has put them squarely behind the 8-ball. So he fails the first opportunity to be a blessing. And King Abimelech calls him out. Now, if you're thinking that this is the same Abimelech from chapter 20, you are wrong, because again, this is more than 75 years later. Now, why do we have the same name? We have the same name because Abimelech means my father is king. And Abimelech is probably a throne name for any king who comes to the throne. Kind of like in Egypt, all of the kings are called what? Pharaohs. It's a throne name. In Rome, all of the emperors are called Caesar. Caesar Tiberius, Caesar Augustus, Caesar Nero, right? So it's a throne name. So this is not the same Abimelech that Abraham would have had the same interaction with, but it could be a son or a grandson that's ruling under the same name. Even in England, they had throne names. King James IV. That means there were other kings that had the same name, King James and King Henry, and all of the typical names that kings would follow. And so, a little trivia for you. We're talking about two different individuals, but same story. Now, let's take a look at this point in the story, because the reality is that this is a failure, but the beauty is that we serve a God not just of another chance, but a second chance, third chance, and fourth chance, because Isaac is going to get an opportunity to make this right later on in the story. And I'm so grateful that we're not one and done. I'm so grateful that when we fail, when we miss the mark, when we fall short, God in His grace and His mercy gives us an opportunity to come back and to do it right again. And that's what we're going to see later on in the story. But here's where the Philistines start drinking haterade in verses 12 through 22, because Isaac's dynamism leads to discord with Abimelech and his people. Remember, there is an awful famine going on. Food is a scarcity. There hasn't been enough rain in the land for people to grow their crops. And I want you to notice how Isaac is blessed in the midst of hardship and difficulty, and how that impacts his neighbors around him. Verse 12 says this: Isaac sowed seed in the land, and in that year he reaped 100 times what was sown, because Yahweh had blessed him. Hear that clearly. The patriarchs are not farmers, and so here Isaac is trying his hand at farming. And he's in the land of the Philistines. He's in this area that his dad hung out in until he was forced out. And Isaac begins to sow seed and to farm. And look at the results. It says that he reaped 100 times what was sown. For every one seed, he reaped 100-fold harvest. For every 10, he reaped 1,000. For every 100, he reaped 10,000. That is unbelievable. I mean, he is just raking in the harvest. And how is that possible with no rainfall and with scarcity and shortages everywhere? Follow the story, because Yahweh blessed him. You see, folks, when everybody else is experiencing scarcity, we can have surplus if God is blessing. It's not because Isaac was a great farmer. He'd never been a farmer. His father wasn't a farmer, and so he's a novice. He's learning the trade. So to reap this kind of harvest has to be God. And there's no rainfall. So where did he get the water from? Well, we got to read on in the story. Verse 13 says, and the man, speaking of Isaac, became rich and kept getting richer and richer and richer and richer and very wealthy. And he had flocks of sheep and herds and cattle and many slaves, and the Philistines were envious of him. Well, I'm sure they were, because he's probably liquidating the food and this massive, exponentially extravagant harvest that God is allowing him to reap. He's probably selling that on the open market for people that are starving and hungry. And they're probably paying top dollar because he's got the best farmer's market in town. The only farmer's market in town. And you can charge what you want to charge when you're the only person in business. And so he's got stupid, crazy rich as a result of what God did. And his neighbors who live in this territory, they got envious of him. Folks, they are drinking their haterade right now. And remember that envy is not what it is in our world. Envy in the ancient world was something that drove you to action. Envy caused you to try to sabotage somebody's blessing or somebody's fortune or somebody's favor. Envy caused you to take people out. Why? Because in the ancient world, they had a scarcity mentality. They believed that resources were limited. And so their scarcity mentality led to a zero-sum mentality. Because when you believe that resources are scarce and there's not enough to go around, and so anything that comes to you is something I can never have, it leads to the zero-sum mentality. The zero-sum mentality says if you win, I have to lose. Or if I win, you lose. But there are no lose-lose or wins-wins. Either somebody wins or somebody loses. The scarcity mentality leads to the zero-sum mentality. And so in the ancient world, if you're winning, that means I'm losing, and the only way for me to win is to take your win and make it mine. Because there's no enterprise or opportunity for me to go get something on my own. I got to get yours. That's the way it was in the hood when we grew up. If somebody had something you wanted, yours is going to become mine. And in the ancient world, that's the way it was. That's the reason why the Jews killed Jesus. Mark 15 says that they envied him, and the only way to get their honor back was to get rid of him. And that is just a staple, a cultural staple, social staple of the ancient world. And so what happens now that the people are envious of how God is blessing Yitzhak? Well, they got to go to work. Be careful, folks, when God is blessing you. There are some folks that are going to be envious. There are some folks that are going to be jealous. And so you just want to be mindful that blessings are great, but they also come with haters. Taylor Swift said, they're going to hate, right? And so we just need to be aware that that's all part and parcel of the game. God blesses, God fortunes us, God wants us to be a testimony to his goodness, and people see that as an opportunity to hate. Verse 15 says, what do they do to activate their envy? Verse 15 says, the Philistines stopped up all the wells that his father's servants had dug in the days his father Abraham in the days of his father Abraham, and they filled them with dirt. And Abimelech said to Yitzhak, he says, leave us, for you are much too powerful for us. So they just didn't have the emotion of envy. They had to do something about it. And how do we sabotage Isaac's prosperity? How do we sabotage his ability to thrive and flourish? Well, in order to grow those crops with no rainfall, you got to have adequate water to water those crops. The flocks and the herds and this large, massive tribe that he's now the patriarch of, everybody's got to be hydrated. The animals got to be watered, and the fields have to be watered well because there's no rain. So they say, we know how to militate against him. We're gonna fill the wells that he's dependent upon. We're gonna fill them with water, so he has no water source. That's what envy does. People got to figure out how do they cut your legs out from under you. How do they embarrass you on social media? How do they get you promoted, demoted at work? How do they tell that secret that you ask them to keep in confidence? People will figure out ways to take your blessing and throw it in the mud. You look at the king. Abimelech says to Yitzhak, he says, we're gonna banish you from the country. You're much too powerful for us. What? You kick somebody out of a country. And so his rationale for expelling Isaac and his tribe is not because of his falsehood, but because he was too powerful, too mighty, too great, too dynamic for the Philistines. They were threatened by Isaac's blessings. Because there was shortage in the land, and he's got surplus. Everybody was decreasing and he was increasing. Everybody was floundering, but Isaac was flourishing. And they said, you got to get away from us. You're too powerful, too influential. It's obvious that God's blessing you, and you can't stay here. Now I want you to notice something in the text that Isaac is going to take his blessings and move on. Guys, sometimes it's not God's will for us to squabble and fight with folks about whether they want us around or not. Sometimes it's better to take our ball and go home. And sometimes we got to stand and fight. And I don't know how God gives us. We need to pray for the wisdom to say, God, do I stand and fight, or do I take my ball and move on to the next playground? I want you to notice something that verse 17 says. So Isaac left there and camped in the Gerar Valley. And he lived there. He didn't stay and fight with Abimelech. He didn't go to war with him. He didn't squabble. He didn't dispute. He took his blessings and he moved on. Isaac's generally a passive guy, so this fits with sort of his disposition and sort of his character. But God doesn't always tell us to move on. Sometimes we got to stand up and fight. Sometimes we can't just let injustice go. Remember, his servants had built those wells. You guys remember from chapter 20 when I showed you the images of these wells were done. Remember we talked about it. These wells were done, some of them 14, 16 stories beneath the earth. Would have taken a year or more, and people lost their lives digging these wells. Blood, sweat, and treasure went in to digging out these wells. And here they're forced to just move on after they've put so much sweat equity and lost life and so much time to find these underground water sources, and they're just forced to move on. Sometimes, guys, we just got to move on. But even though we move on from that place, the blessings go with us. They don't stay in the place where we were. Watch this. It says in verse 18, Isaac reopened the wells that had been dug in the days of his father Abraham, and that the Philistines had stopped up after Abraham died. And he gave them the names his father had given them. But the troublemakers followed, the blessings followed, but so do the troublemakers. Watch this. It says, then Isaac's servants dug in the valley and found a well of spring water there. But the herdsmen of Gerar quarreled with Isaac's herdmen and said, the water is ours. So he named the well Esek because they argued with him. Verse 21 says, then they dug another well and quarreled over that one also, so he named it Sitnah. And he moved from there and dug another, and they did not quarrel over it, and he named it Rehoboth. And said, for now Yahweh has made space for us, and we will be fruitful in the land. So here, as they move into a valley area, they're just industrious and skillful and masterful at finding these underwater water sources. And the first well that they dug away from, after being banished from the land of the Philistines, they named Esek. Esek in the Hebrew means to argue or quarrel or dispute, and he names it that because the men from Gerar had followed them and had quarreled about these wells. How? When Isaac's men were the one that dug the wells. Well, they probably argued about, well, this is our land. And so the well, you dug the well, but you dug it on our land, and therefore the well is ours. That's probably the line of reasoning that they use. So Isaac's servants go and dig a second well. And this one is Sitnah. Sitnah means to oppose or to be an adversary. It's a derivative of where we get the word Satan or Satan from. Satan means adversary or the one who opposes. But then they continue they get kicked off of that land, and they move to a third place. And they finally, the third well digging is the charm, and this well is undisputed. So Isaac names it Rehoboth, and it means to make room. Sometimes, guys, not the first attempt, the second attempt, but it'll be the third attempt that God uses to be successful. And sometimes we just got to persist in not giving up. When folks are clamoring for our blessings, sometimes it's better for us just to keep moving and take our blessings with us. Now here's the last movement and the last two paragraphs in this text. This one is God's blessings will cause some of the folks to covenant, some of the same folks to covenant with us. Remember, God's blessings will cause some folks to connive against us. God's blessings will also cause some of the same folks to covenant with us. Here's a little bit of irony, and we had a problem in verses 1 through 22, and here's the solution to the problem in verses 23 through 33. And God's divine disclosure compels Isaac's devotion to Yahweh in verses 23 through 25. The text says, verse 23, from there, Isaac went up to Beersheba. Now, I want you to notice, you guys remember this map from before, but Isaac has been in the land of Gerar, here, the land of the Philistines. He travels a little bit southeast to Beersheba. This is one of the home bases for the patriarchs, and so Isaac is now in familiar territory. Isaac is in a place he would have called home. Isaac is in a place where he doesn't have to worry about the Philistines and the folks of Gerar. He can let his hair down. He's familiar with Beersheba. And God meets him there, and the Lord appeared to him in verse 24 that night and says, I am the God of your father Abraham. Do not be afraid, for I am with you, and I will bless you and multiply your offspring because of my servant Abraham. So he built an altar there and called on the name of Yahweh and pitched his tent there, and Isaac's servants dug another well there. Now this is wonderful, because after encountering intense envy and rigorous animosity, perhaps Isaac was a little shaken. Therefore, God says to him in verse 24, he says, you don't have to be afraid, I'm with you. I know you've been dealing with contentious people. I know your life has been characterized by discord over these wells and people sabotaging your water sources, but I'm with you. You have nothing to be afraid of. And I'm sure that those words from God were an encouragement to Isaac, even though he's probably wanted to stand up and fight. He's probably wanted to defend himself and defend the rights of him and his servants. He is passively moved on. Every time there was a quarreling about wells or about territory, Isaac just moves on. And God says, son, you don't have to be afraid, because I'm with you. Now, like father, like son, whenever God makes promises to Abraham, what does he do? He builds an altar and calls upon the name of the Lord. This is euphemism for worshiping God through sacrifice and through prayer. And what does Isaac do? God appears to him, makes him exceedingly great promises, and in verse 25, he builds an altar and calls upon the name of the Lord. Again, the virtues of the Father show up in the Son, both the virtues and the vices. Now, let's move to this last paragraph, because again, the same folks that were conniving against you will turn and want a covenant with you. Last paragraph, 26 through 33, Abimelech proposes a deal to end the discord with Isaac. Isn't that convenient? After they've got access to his wells now, after they've taken his resources, now they want to wave the white flag and cut a covenant. How convenient is that? Verse 26 says, now Abimelech came to him from Gerar with Ahuzath, his adversary, and Phicol, the commander of his army. Now, you guys remember Phicol from chapter 20. His commander of his army was also named Phicol, and so that too is probably a military name that passed on to whoever was commander of the army. This is not the same Phicol from Genesis chapter 20, the same way this isn't the same Abimelech. Verse 27, Isaac said to him, why have you come to me? You hated me and sent me away from you. Isaac has thrown diplomacy out the window, and now he done got a little steel in his spine. Abimelech has showed up with his two chief advisors. He said, what are you guys doing here? You expelled me from your country. You treated me horribly. You hated on me. You and your people. What are you doing here? Thought you didn't want me around, so what are you doing here? Verse 28, they replied, we have clearly seen, watch this, how Yahweh has been with you. And we think there should be an oath between the two parties, between us and you, so let's cut a covenant between us and you. The same way Abimelech in chapter 20 saw that God was with Abraham, here this Abimelech says it's clear. We've made some observations, and we are absolutely, positively certain that God is with you and that God is blessing you. And if God's blessing you the way he blessed you to reap those harvests in our land, we want to be a friend of anybody that got that kind of fortune and favor with one of the gods. And so these guys are here offering a sugar deal because they want some of that blessing that Isaac has got on him. Guys, don't bemoan that. We should live in such a way that people want to hang out with us and partner with us and collaborate with us because there's some sort of blessing that they see on our life that they want. That's not a terrible thing. It should be something that people should recognize that we're highly favored by God, and they want to rub shoulders with us. That is not a bad thing. Verse 29 says, part of the covenant will be the stipulations here in verse 29. You will not harm us just as we have not harmed you. But we've only done what is good to you. He's got a different version of how that story worked out, doesn't he? He says, we sent you away in peace. Oh, really? Is that what y'all call shalom? He said, and look, man, you guys, you are now blessed by Yahweh. Now, Abimelech is totally false about how they treated Yitzhak, but I'm sure he's probably like, you guys sent me, or you guys did good to me, huh? You sent me away in peace? Sure. But look at how gregarious Isaac is. So Isaac agrees with Abimelech and his advisors, and he prepares a banquet for them, and they ate and drank all night and probably got a little loopy, celebrating the covenant. This is what they call in the ancient world a covenant meal. When you strike a covenant with somebody, you cement the covenant with a meal, and that's what they do. Then they got up early in verse 31 the next morning, swore the oath to each other, and Isaac sent them on their way, and they left in peace. Now, Isaac is actually sending them away in peace. They didn't send him away in peace, but they said they did. And on the same day, watch this, Isaac's servants came to tell him about the well that they had dug, saying, Master, we found more water. And so Isaac called the place where they found new water to dig new wells, he called it Shiva. Therefore, the name of the city is Beersheba today. Beer means the well of, and Shiva means oath or the number 7. And probably means the well of oath because Isaac had just cut a covenant with Abimelech and his men, the same way Abraham had made a covenant with Abimelech, but he had given him seven lambs, remember? And so we weren't sure whether Shiva meant 7 to connote the 7 lambs that were given, or whether it meant oath in chapter 20, because both things happened. There were 7 lambs and an oath. Here it's clearly Isaac means oath in the text. So here we see Isaac developing some of the virtues and vices of his father. Here's a quick Coram Deo, and I look forward to chatting with you guys about this on Tuesday, because I'm sure you're going to have some fascinating insights to share with us. Number 1, God is Lord over the generations. As he was with Abraham, so he is with his son Yitzhak. As God is with us, God's going to be with our kids and our grandkids and our great-grandkids, because God is the God of the generations. And we're seeing God's faithfulness to the generations of people who love him in the text. That is evident. And I look forward to God being with my girls the way he's been with Stacy and I. Number two, the virtues and the vices of the parents oftentimes manifest in the lives of their children. So let us be mindful of what we model at home. And then lastly, when we're basking in the blessings of God, folks will either connive against us or covenant with us. And sometimes they may opt to do both. And that too, God will give us wisdom to navigate. So God, we thank you for this installment in the Genesis story. This is deja vu all over again. But yet it's a little different because Isaac is blessed exponentially by you. And the haters hate him more than they did Abraham. And yet he shows restraint and discipline, not to war, not to quarrel, not to fight, but he takes his blessings and he keeps moving on. Thank you, God, that when we have the courage and the fortitude and the faith to knowing when to choose our battles, that our blessings go with us. They're not confined to a geographical location, God. We take them with us. Isaac took your blessings with them as he headed back to Beersheba. So God, we know that your blessings are in us and through us and around us. So God, if we have to leave that job or we have to move out of that neighborhood or that state or whatever it is, God, we know that your Spirit will go with us the way you were with Isaac in this story. So, Father, thank you that you give us a lesson for why parenting matters and how we are to model virtues and minimize the vices that we display and put on showcase for our kids, knowing that they will pick up those unhealthy and ungodly character traits because they saw it in mommy and daddy. So, God, give us wisdom to live out our faith in authentic ways, in compelling ways that inspire and motivate and compel our kids to want to follow you genuinely with all of their hearts. God, what a great story in Genesis 26. Thank you for Isaac's courage. Thank you for how you blessed him. Thank you for his servants and their industrious, masterful, skillful ways in which they kept finding underground water sources. When there was no water from heaven, they found it under the earth. May we be industrious like that. May we find ways out of no ways. May we find answers where there are no answers. May we work hard to find the water sources in our parched land. Give us wisdom and knowledge to do that so that we may be a blessing to people who desperately need to see what God's blessings actually look like. So God, we thank you and praise you so much in Jesus' name. Amen.